بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So alhamdulillah, we started the book خلاصة تعظيم العلم, the summary of glorifying knowledge, of venerating knowledge, by Shaykh Salih ibn Abdullah ibn Hamad al Usaymi حفظه ta'ala. So quick revision. Right, Muhib, tell me what are the 6 rights of a student of knowledge?
He has rights upon himself,
Upon himself,
his
teachers,
the
place,
his
books,
knowledge
knowledge
itself,
itself,
and his colleagues.
and his colleagues. No, ahsant. And Tanzil, give me 3 books in regards to the ethics of student knowledge. This book has one. Yeah, he did تعظيم العلم. Also, this is a summary, but yeah, no, that's one book. حلية طالب علم, the Abu Bakr Abu Zayd. تذكرة السامع المتكلم by Ibn Jama'ah. Right. Naeem, summarize beneficial knowledge. What is beneficial knowledge? Right, yeah.
Knowledge that gets you closer to Allah and makes your heart fear Allah, and is based on the Quran and Sunnah.
Good, so there's 2 parts to it. There's a source of it, where is beneficial knowledge derived from? The Quran and Sunnah. And what's the effect of it? It takes you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. What was the summary of the introduction of the author, Riyadh? Summarize it. What was the point he's trying to make in his summary, in his introduction?
He's trying to tell why we seek knowledge.
And why do we seek knowledge?
The 8 reasons.
8 reasons?
The 8 virtues of seeking knowledge.
That was our introduction that we just mentioned. The author, I'm talking about the author. Shaykh al Usaymi, what did he say in his introduction?
Depending on how much you venerate knowledge.
Good. Depending on how much you venerate knowledge, that's how much knowledge you will attain. And how do you venerate knowledge?
By cleaning your heart.
By?
Cleaning your heart.
That's one. What does that come under? That's what we took last lesson. What does that come under? Yeah, what does that come under? That's the first point of these 20. What are these 20 points? Etiquettes of seeking knowledge. Okay, so how do you venerate knowledge? By applying the etiquettes of seeking knowledge. And from them are the 20 which I mentioned in this book, and we took one last week. Hey, come on, you guys need to revise more. Right. When it comes to cleansing the vessel of knowledge, what do we cleanse it from? Kabirul. And those looking on, I'm asking you more.
Sins.
Okay. Shirk, okay. Okay, we said that the disease of the heart go back to doubts and desires. Okay? That's from one angle of what we cleanse the heart. From another angle is what he mentioned, shirk, and then bid'ah, and then major sins, and then minor sins. That's what we have to cleanse our hearts from. Now, okay, khalas, I'll leave it for that for today, but make sure you guys go over it, inshallah. Right, page 17, the second principle, which is making intention sincerely to Him, or sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the second principle, and this in reality is a branch of the first one. The first one was to cleanse the heart, right? And one of the ways of cleansing the heart, or one of the things that we have to do is, whilst we are seeking knowledge, we have to make sure that we seek knowledge sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the definition of sincerity Islamically? What is the definition of sincerity Islamically? Shaykh al Usaymi, he says, the reality of sincerity Islamically is تصفية القلب من إرادة غير الله. It is to purify the heart, from intending other than Allah. From intending other than Allah. تصفية القلب, with the صاد, تصفية القلب من إرادة غير الله. Cleansing or purifying the heart from intending other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this definition has two parts. Firstly, you have to clean your heart. You purify your heart, that you have nothing in your heart. This action, clean it. Nobody, don't think of anyone. Don't think of your dad. Don't think of the imam. Don't think of this peer. Don't think of this wali. No one. And then the only one that you place within your heart is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the only one, the only being that you should be intending. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the definition of sincerity. When you are, let's say, you are praying salah, what does it mean to be sincere when you are praying salah? Meaning you are only praying for Allah, there's nobody else in your mind. No, you're not praying your salah because Imam is watching you. You're not praying salah because somebody said that if you go pray today, I'll give you £10 or whatever. Okay? You're not doing it for the money. Or anything like that. You're doing it only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the reality of sincerity. And to remember that definition, Shaykh al Usaymi also made some lines of poetry. He said, for those that want to write it down, إخلاصنا لله صف القلب من إرادة سواه فاحذر يا فطن. إخلاصنا لله, our sincerity is for Allah. صف القلب من, so purify your heart from إرادة سواه, intending other than Him. فاحذر يا فطن, so be aware, O intelligent person. Some lines of poetry in Arabic for those that want to memorize the definition of sincerity in Arabic. إخلاصنا لله صف القلب من إرادة سواه فاحذر يا فطن. So now we start reading the chapter. The author, he says, verily sincerity in actions is the foundation of its acceptance and the root of assent. So the Shaykh here is saying that the foundation of the acceptance of any action that you do, and here we're talking about seeking of knowledge, the foundation of your acceptance of this hard work that you are putting in seeking knowledge, and secondly, the root of assent, the way that you can, the correct way in attaining that beneficial knowledge is only by sincerity. It is only by having sincerity. So the greatest way in attaining knowledge is by being sincere. Never mind it just being accepted, right? One thing is being accepted, and then the second thing is actually gaining that knowledge. What's the greatest way in attaining that knowledge? It is by being sincere. And we're going to mention a statement of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma shortly, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفَاءَ وَيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. And they were not commanded except to worship Allah, being sincere to Him in the religion and inclining to the truth. And then after that, the Shaykh mentions the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He used a different wording, which is Bukhari and Muslim, but what you guys can memorize is the famous wording, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. That every action is according to their intention, and the slave attains that which he intended. Then on the next page, and that hadith, by the way, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, we don't have time to go into the details of that hadith, but that hadith, subhanallah, is a very powerful hadith, and it has a lot of detail. It's a topic of sincerity generally, right? That's why Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah said about this hadith, that this hadith is thuluthul ilm, a third of knowledge. وَيَدْخُلُ فِي 70 بَابًا فِي الْفِقْهِ, or بَابًا مِنْ أَبْوَابِ الْفِقْهِ. It is a third of knowledge, and it enters into 70 different chapters of fiqh. It enters into 70 different chapters of fiqh. Meaning this hadith and the issues of sincerity, you could talk about it from so many different angles, right? And so much detail and so much can be said about it. And we don't have time to mention all of it, so we're just going to focus on what the author said, Shaykh al Usaymi has said in this book, and the main issues. And then inshallah, once we study books like Al-Arba'in an-Nawawiyya, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, that's the first hadith in there. So there we can mention some more detail regarding the hadith. And likewise, we can every time, because this hadith is repeated in so many books, we can keep adding more like that, inshallah. After that, the author, he says on page 18, in the second paragraph, وَمَا سَبَقَ مَنْ سَبَقَ وَلَا وَصَلَ مَنْ وَصَلَ مِنَ السَّلَفِ الصَّالِحِينَ إِلَّا بِالْإِخْلَاصِ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. The righteous predecessors did not surpass who they surpassed, nor reach where they reached, except through sincerity to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Subhanallah. The Shaykh is saying that when you talk about the Salaf from the Sahaba, Tabi'een, Atba' Tabi'een, what allowed them to reach this high status? What allowed them to reach this high status? It was them being sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what we mentioned in the beginning. The greatest way in attaining knowledge and its acceptance is by being sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he said, إِنَّمَا يَحْفَظُ الْمَرْءُ عَلَى قَدْرِ نِيَّتِهِ. That a person memorizes according to the amount of his intention. A person memorizes according to the amount of his intention. The more sincere he is, the more he'll memorize. He memorizes that which is beneficial. And the less that he has, less sincerity that he has, the less he will memorize. رواه ابن عساكر وغيره. It's narrated by Ibn Asakir and other than him. And Shaykh al Usaymi, he comments on the statement of Ibn Abbas and he says, إِذَا قَوِيَ إِخْلَاصُ الْعَبْدِ قَوِيَ حِفْظُهُ. If the sincerity of the slave becomes stronger, then his memory becomes stronger. وَإِدْرَاكُهُ. And his understanding becomes stronger. وَإِذَا ضَعُفَ إِخْلَاصُهُ. And if his sincerity becomes weaker, ضَعُفَ حِفْظُهُ وَإِدْرَاكُهُ. Then his memory and his understanding becomes weaker. And then in the book, Shaykh al Usaymi, after that, he mentions a incident or something which happened with Imam Ahmad. So he says, Abu Bakr al-Marudhi said, I heard a man saying to Abu Abdullah, meaning Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and he mentioned to him truthfulness and sincerity. So this person was speaking to Imam Ahmad, and the topic of sincerity and truthfulness was mentioned. So what did Abu Abdullah say? What did Imam Ahmad say? He said, بِهَذَا ارتفع القوم. By that were the people raised. The people, the Sahaba. He's referring to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So he's saying what allowed the Sahaba to have such a high status in this religion? Their sincerity. And then he says, indeed a person only reaches knowledge in accordance to his sincerity. And that's the statement of Ibn Abbas basically. إِنَّمَا يَحْفَظُ الْمَرْءُ عَلَى قَدْرِ نِيَّتِهِ. That person only memorizes, he attains beneficial knowledge عَلَى قَدْرِ نِيَّتِهِ, dependent upon his intention. Now the Shaykh is going to move on and basically he answers a question now. How does a person become sincere when he comes to seeking knowledge? How does a person become sincere when he is seeking knowledge? What are the intentions that he should intend when seeking knowledge? That's what he's going to answer now. And Shaykh al Usaymi, he refers to these intentions as principles. He refers to these intentions as principles. So he says, and sincerity in knowledge stands upon 4 principles. And by way of them does the intention of the student of knowledge become actualized if he seeks it. And they are. So now he's going to mention the 4 principles when it comes to seeking knowledge. The first, removing ignorance from himself. The first intention that a student of knowledge has when they are seeking knowledge is that they remove ignorance from themselves. So why are you learning? So that you can remove ignorance and you can learn what Allah has said in the Quran and what the Prophet ﷺ has said in his Sunnah. By studying those things that is upon him from servitude and becoming acquainted with the goals of the commands and prohibitions. Number 2, removing ignorance from the people by teaching them and guiding them to what contains rectification of the worldly life and the hereafter. So the second, this is number 2, after the first. After you remove ignorance from yourself, then remove ignorance from others. So a person shouldn't hasten to do the second point before he has done the first. Right? So firstly we remove ignorance from ourselves, and then after that we remove ignorance from others by teaching them, giving da'wah to them. And that is not restricted to having a lesson like I'm doing now. Right? Doing a lesson like this where it's recorded and you have students, this is later on. But there's no harm in you giving da'wah to your family, to your friends. That comes under the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Transmit from me even if it is 1 ayah. As for doing tasaddur, as for taking a position before you have attained knowledge properly, so that will harm you. that will harm you. That's why there's a legal maxim in the religion, a principle in the religion: "Man ista'jala shay'an qabla awanih, uqiba bihirmanih." Whoever hastens to attain something before its time, then he will be punished by being deprived of it. Whoever seeks to attain something before its time, he will be punished by being deprived of it. Meaning, if you are trying to attain something and it's not the correct time, right? Your punishment is that you won't get it at all. And this is a general principle in the religion. So, one famous example they give in the books of fiqh is inheritance. You're going to inherit from your father. And when you inherit, after he passes away, right? But now you are trying to attain that wealth before the correct time by killing your father, for example. So what happens in that scenario? In that scenario, the son gets nothing. If somebody kills their father to get the inheritance, then one of the three things, but one of the things that prevents a person from gaining any inheritance is killing. So if you kill your father, you're going to get nothing. Why? Because you've tried to attain that before its correct time. Likewise, you try to attain a certain position before its correct time and be busy with teaching and having a status, then you're not going to attain that knowledge. And how many people do I know that get busy with teaching things online, and they become busy with that, and that prevents them from actually learning. And I know, I'm talking about students in Medina. I know students in Medina. I know their level because I teach a lot of them. I teach a lot of them privately, right? But then they'll become busy with teaching online and opening this academy online. They don't learn much. They graduate, their knowledge isn't that strong. Why? Because they got excited too early, and in the second, third year, that's it, they started taking a status. That time will come after, if Medina, somebody goes to Medina, right, after they graduate, or maybe in their final year, that's when they can start. So likewise, if I'm talking about Medina students, then what about people who are studying full time? That time when it comes to teaching others and so on, that time will come. But first we have to make sure that we set ourselves solid foundations when it comes to knowledge. And when are you ready to teach others? Your teacher will tell you. You ask your teacher. I remember once I asked my teacher, Shaykh Muhammad Abdul Karim al-Ishaqi. I was in Medina. I was in maybe like 4th year or 5th. And I asked him, I said, Shaykh, there's some new students. Can I teach them the book Al-Ajurumiyah? He said no. Then after about 6 months, I asked him again, because then we studied the book with him. I asked him, then he tested me. Then he said, yes, now you can teach. And I remember the way I was able to teach after waiting 6 months. If I had started teaching 6 months prior, I wouldn't have been able to teach like that. So your teacher knows best when you should start teaching and when you shouldn't. Now, obviously, this is generally sometimes due to a situation or where a person is from or the situation a person is going in. It might require him to maybe start a bit earlier. Like if he's in a place where there's no da'wah going on whatsoever, then that person might have to start giving a da'wah a bit more, depending on the situation. But that is a separate situation, that'll be an exception, and still a person should go to his teacher for that. So the second intention that person should have when it comes to seeking knowledge is removing ignorance from the people by teaching them and guiding them to what contains rectification of the worldly life and the hereafter. Number 3, giving life to knowledge and protect it from being wasted. You're preserving knowledge. You are preserving knowledge. If you are, for example, you're in a place, everyone is in heedlessness. Nobody knows what the Sunnah is. Nobody knows how to recite the Quran, but you're seeking knowledge. Right? You in that area are preserving that knowledge. Anybody who wants that knowledge, they'll come to you and you can teach them the knowledge. It's preserved by you being there. But if you're not there or you haven't attained that knowledge, nobody in that place will know that knowledge. So one of the intentions a student of knowledge should have is that they preserve that knowledge. And number 4 is acting upon that knowledge. Acting upon that knowledge. This is one of the main intentions that a student of knowledge should have. That when a person learns, he learns so that he can act upon it. And that is the fruit of knowledge. That is the fruit of knowledge. And the reason we attain knowledge is so that we can act upon it. And look, if you look at the Sahaba, Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami from the Tabi'een narrated that some of his teachers of the Quran, and he mentioned Ibn Mas'ud and Uthman radiallahu anhum and others, he said they used to memorize 10 ayat, understand those 10 ayat, and act upon those 10 ayat, and then they would move on to the next 10 ayat. And then he says, فَتَعَلَّمْنَا الْعِلْمَ وَالْعَمَلَ جَمِيعًا. That's how we learn knowledge and action at the same time. And I believe it was Ali radiallahu anh, he said that knowledge is calling for you to act upon it. So either you act upon it or that knowledge will go. That it'll be a missed call. That knowledge will go. And that's why not only should we act upon the hadith because that is, or upon that knowledge because that is the intent and that's the benefit of that knowledge, it's also a means of you attaining knowledge. Some of the Salaf used to say, كُنَّا نَسْتَعِينُ عَلَى حِفْظِ الْحَدِيثِ بِالْعَمَلِ بِهِ. We used to seek aid in memorizing hadith by acting upon it. Right? If you have, let's say you learn the dua for entering the masjid. If you say it every single time you enter the masjid, you're going to memorize that dua, you're going to know it. But if you learn it and then you never say it, somebody asks you, what's the dua for entering the masjid? You won't be able to answer. You learnt it, but because you didn't act upon it, you're not going to know it. And that's why if you type in Google, you type in the learning pyramid. The learning pyramid. They talk about what's the best way of retaining knowledge. So I can't remember the exact order and exact numbers, but something like just by reading you retain 5%, listening 10%. If you see a demonstration, about 20-30%. You act upon it, 60% chance that you'll retain that knowledge. You know, something like that. Now, some of the scholars, when it comes to education, they don't fully agree with it, but the point is still there, right? The acting upon it it helps you attain that knowledge. So we have to have both. So there's two benefits. So first is the point of learning is that you can act upon it, and that's how you'll benefit from that knowledge. And the second is it'll also allow you to retain that knowledge. And Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi rahimahullah, he has a book called اقتضاء العلم العمل. اقتضاء العلم العمل. Knowledge necessitates action, or knowledge mandates action. It's a book where he's gathered many of the statements of the Salaf regarding knowledge necessitating action. And it should be translated into English. It's not a big book. It's not a big book. So that is اقتضاء العلم العمل by Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi. And then we have the famous story of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah as well. How he was asked in his Musnad. Who remembers how many hadith in Musnad? 40,000? 27,000. Maybe if you count the recurring so on, but it's 27,000. Okay? He was asked, have you acted upon every single hadith in your Musnad? He said, yes. And there was one, and he said there was one hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he did hijama, cupping. And the Prophet ﷺ paid the one doing the cupping 1 dinar. So Imam Ahmad, that was the only hadith that was left for him to act upon. He went, he found someone to do that cupping, and he also gave him 1 dinar. Why? So that at least once he's acted upon that hadith. Now, then the Shaykh, he says, very the Salaf, may Allah have mercy upon them, used to fear the loss of sincerity in their pursuit of knowledge. So they would be wary of claiming sincerity, not because they never actualized it in their hearts. So all the Salaf, they give a lot of importance to sincerity. And they were always scared of them not being sincere. And you'll find statements of them claiming that they didn't have sincerity. Not because they were sincere, but out of their humility and out of the importance they give to it, they would deny them having it. So Imam Ahmad was asked, have you sought knowledge for the sake of Allah? So he replied, Lillahi aziz, walakinnahu shay'un hubbiba ilayya fatalabtuh. For Allah is extremely difficult, but it was something made beloved to me, so I sought it. And he's saying, I enjoyed it, that's why I did it. I didn't really do it for Allah. But that's out of his humility, rahimahullah ta'ala. Then the Shaykh, he says, and whoever wastes sincerity has missed out on a great amount of knowledge and substantial amount of good. You not attain knowledge, nor has it been accepted. You put in all that effort, hours and hours of attending lessons, traveling, you spent money, revision, revising. None of that is accepted. Why? Because you weren't sincere. So it is befitting for the seeker of salvation to constantly check this foundation, i.e. sincerity in all affairs, little or large, private or public. This constant checking will lead a person to seriously remedy his intentions. Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah, is given the title Amir al-Mu'mineen fil Hadith, the leader of the believers in Hadith, one of the major scholars from the Salaf when it came to Hadith. He said, ما عالجت شيئا أشد علي من نيتي لأنها تتقلب علي. I have never struggled to remedy anything more difficult upon me than my intention, for indeed it constantly changes upon me. And that's the reason the heart is called the heart. The heart in Arabic language is known as qalb. Right, qalb. But the word qalb actually means to change. That's why in tajweed, who can tell me what's qalb in tajweed? After Nun Sakin comes Ba. So what do? You recite it as a meme. So it changes. The letter basically changes. So min ba'dihi, you recite it min ba'dihi. It changes. That's what qalb means. Right? So the heart is called qalb. Why? Because it keeps changing. And that's why the poet, he says, قد سمي القلب قلبا من تقلبه فاحذر على القلب من قلب وتحويل. He says قد سمي القلب قلبا من تقلبه. The heart is known as qalb because it keeps changing. One day you're happy, one day you're sad, you're this, you're that. The heart keeps changing. فاحذر على القلب. So be aware over the heart من قلب وتحويل, from changing in terms of your sincerity. So you might start off sincere, then it could change. Right? So be careful that your intention doesn't change and it's now seeking knowledge for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So an example of this is the next statement. The Shaykh, he says, in fact, Sulaiman al-Hashimi said, ربما أحدث بحديث واحد ولي نية. Perhaps I narrate one hadith and I have an intention. فإذا أتيت على بعضه تغيرت نيتي. So if I reach a portion of that hadith, my intention changes. So one single hadith turns out to need many intentions, i.e. to rectify it. For the hadith الواحد يحتاج إلى نيات. He says, I'm narrating one hadith and then I see somebody walks in and I have to then, my niyyah changes, so I have to rectify my intention. And that's what we mean by rectifying our intention. What does it mean? Is that you bring back your intention to that which Allah has commanded you to do. Right? So if I'm teaching for the sake of Allah and then I see a shaykh walk in, so I'm like, okay, you know what, let me mention more benefits to show that I have more knowledge. I have to now rectify my intention and bring it back. I'm not teaching for him. I'm teaching for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the intent of what the author has mentioned here and these narrations is that a person, a slave generally, but more so a student of knowledge, he should exert all efforts into making his intention sincere. And that's why this hadith, إنما الأعمال بالنيات, Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi, he said, لو صنفت كتابا, if I were to write a book, I would have placed the hadith إنما الأعمال بالنيات in the beginning of every single chapter. Keep reminding me regarding my intention. Especially now with social media. It's very easy for someone to corrupt their intention with social media by saying, oh look, I'm in this dars, or we studied this today with our shaykh. It's very common. And it's very easy for shaitan to deceive a person into making him unsiya through social media. And there are other intentions of seeking knowledge. Maybe one of them can be gaining the virtues of knowledge which have been mentioned. Likewise, sitting in the masjid, being around righteous companions, and so on. There's other benefits and other righteous intentions that a person can have in seeking knowledge. And likewise, there are many intentions that are corrupt intentions, such as seeking knowledge only to debate, or seeking knowledge so that you can have students later on, or seeking knowledge to show off. All of these are corrupt intentions. However, the main intentions that a student of knowledge should have are the four that the Shaykh mentioned here. Hence why he referred to them as principles. These are your foundational principles. And the others are extra. The others are extra. And there are many other hadith regarding knowledge when it comes to hadith regarding sincerity. For example, one very powerful hadith which was authenticated by Al-Albani, the Prophet said, مَا ذِئْبَانِ جَائِعَانِ أُرْسِلَا فِي غَنَمٍ. That there are not two wolves who have been sent upon some sheep. They are not worse and more dangerous than a person who is eager upon al-mali wa sharaf, wealth and nobility. What causes even more corruption and even more dangerous than two wolves being let free onto some sheep is that a person, his intention is not correct and he's only doing things to gain a position or to gain wealth. And it's a very powerful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. What happens if a wolf was to be sent into a flock of sheep? It'll kill all of them, destroy the crops as well. But the Prophet ﷺ saying what is even more worse and dangerous than that and causes more corruption is a person not having the correct intention. And Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, he has a whole risala, whole book explaining this hadith. Another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, directed more towards knowledge itself. The Prophet ﷺ said, "من تعلم علما مما يبتغى به وجه الله لا يتعلمه إلا ليصيب به عرضا من الدنيا لم يجد عرف الجنة يوم القيامة." It's a hadith in Tirmidhi. The Prophet ﷺ said that whoever seeks knowledge, and he doesn't seek knowledge except to gain something from the dunya, he's not doing it for Allah. What will that person, what's the recompense of that person? لم يجد عرف الجنة يوم القيامة. He will not even smell the fragrance of paradise on the day of judgment. He will not even smell the fragrance of Jannah on the day of judgment. In another, and likewise there's other hadith as well of the Prophet ﷺ which indicates to the same meaning. So this is the first principle, which is that a person, he makes his intention sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what do you guys have to learn from this? If I test you next week, minimum a dalil and the 4 principles, and anything else is extra, and maybe the definition of sincerity as well. Now, the third principle is number 3 on page 22, to gather all one's zeal upon knowledge, i.e., all of a person's eagerness, his zeal, his attention should only be upon knowledge, and he should not become busy with anything else. And then the Shaykh, he says, you gather your eagerness by having these 3 things. How do you make sure that all of your motivation and all of the zeal that you have and this eagerness that you have, how do you make sure that it is all directed to knowledge and that you're not thinking about anything else? You're not thinking about things which are haram. You're not even thinking about things which are permissible but they are wasting your time. But you're focused just on knowledge.
What's zeal?
Zeal, yani your eagerness or motivation. So if somebody is very zealous, it means that he's very eager. He has a lot of motivation. Does that make sense?
No.
So zeal means motivation. Motivation. You know motivation?
Yeah, no motivation.
Yeah, class, motivation.
Motivation.
So to gather all of one's motivation upon knowledge. So you're really motivated now, right?
Yeah.
You're pumped up. You got to make sure that all of that motivation, that eagerness that you have to direct it somewhere. Now, this chapter is talking about how do you make sure that all of that motivation is directed just towards knowledge. You're not busying yourself with wasting time going to a coffee shop and talking about X, Y, and Z. You're not wasting your time doing it. How do you just focus on knowledge? And the only thing is that you think about is knowledge, and you just benefit from knowledge. That's what this chapter is talking about. That a student of knowledge, his state should be, the only thing that he's thinking about is knowledge. Make sense? Yeah? So how do you do this? The Shaykh mentions 3 things. These 3 things a person should uphold, and that way he will have gathered all of his eagerness, motivation and zeal upon knowledge. Number 1, al-hirsu ala ma yanfa', to be ardent in that which benefits you. So when the slave is guided to that which benefits him, he strives over it. What does that mean? The first point is having tunnel vision. Upon tunnel vision upon that which benefits you. Upon that which benefits you. So you need to work out what is beneficial for me. So you've realized, for example, these lessons are beneficial for you. Right. That's all you got to focus on. If you hear, oh, there's this lecture going on, right? It sounds like a nice topic, right? And it's the same time as my lesson that I attend. Let's go to that. No, forget all of that. You've focused on something, right? Only look at that. Don't look at anything else. And then number 2, to seek assistance with Allah in acquiring it. Al-isti'anatu billah fi tahsilihi. That you seek the assistance of Allah when it comes to attaining it. So number one was you have tunnel vision. Okay, and by the way, just to expand on the tunnel vision upon which benefits you are these lessons, right? Not general lectures, not podcasts, not conferences, right? These are extra things. If you have time for it, maybe. But your main concern should be beneficial lessons, structured lessons. Because going to a lecture is like picking up a book and reading it from page number 50. Right? You might benefit a little bit, but you don't really know what's going on. Sounds nice, but you don't know the context. You don't benefit from it fully. right? But when you come to these lessons, then that's that reading the book from the beginning till the end. You have full understanding of what is being talked about, and so on. And you'll find those that just busy themselves with lectures and conferences and YouTube videos and podcasts, their knowledge is all over the place. But you find those who have studied knowledge and stuck to what is beneficial and the correct way of seeking knowledge, they're the ones who have that solid foundation. Then later on you can add, if you want to listen to something, sometimes I listen to a random lecture here and there of certain sheikh, no problem. But that's extra, right? Right now your tunnel vision, your main thing is what is beneficial, and for us we would say these lessons, okay? And then number 2 is seeking assistance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-alim, the all knowledgeable. And He is the one who hands out His knowledge to whom He wills. Whatever knowledge that you have, it is a pure blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a pure virtue from Allah. It's not something that we have attained ourselves. So we should only be seeking that knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَوْ شِئْنَا لَرَفَعْنَاهُ بِهَا وَلَكِنَّهُ أَخْلَدَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ. How Allah mentioned that if we wanted to, we could have raised this person. But then he wanted to follow his desires, so Allah brought him down. If you go to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll remain upon this earth. But if you go towards Allah, you seek knowledge only for Allah, for Allah, and you seek knowledge and you ask for that knowledge, you make dua to only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will raise your ranks. So we should always be making dua and seeking assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if a person, he does not seek assistance from Allah and he tries to seek knowledge by himself, then he will not benefit. And in some lines of poetry, إِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ عَوْنٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِلْفَتَى فَأَوَّلُ مَا يَجْنِي عَلَيْهِ اجْتِهَادُهُ. If a person does not have assistance from Allah, if Allah doesn't help that person, the first issue that this person will come across is he will think that he himself is attaining that knowledge. He himself, his own ijtihad, he will be dependent upon himself. And he thinks he knows everything. So you'll find people, if they come to that stage and you find this person think that he's arrogant, he thinks he knows so much, then one of the reasons could be is that he's not sought that help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not asked Allah for that knowledge. We mentioned last week some du'as the Prophet would make. Allahumma inni asaluka ilman nafi'a. Oh Allah, I ask you for beneficial knowledge. Allahumma inni a'udhuka min ilmin la yanfa'. Oh Allah, I seek refuge from you from knowledge which does not benefit. Allah said in the Quran, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. It was commanded the Prophet to make the dua, oh my Lord, increase me in my knowledge. So we should always be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that knowledge. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, رُبَّمَا طَالَعْتُ عَلَى الْآيَةِ الْوَاحِدَةِ نَحْوُ مِئَةَ تَفْسِيرٍ. That maybe to understand one ayah and to know the tafsir of one ayah, I would read 100 different tafsirs. Anyone who reads 100, if I read 100 different tafsir, I think I know everything. Right? 100 tafsirs, subhanAllah. But what does Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah say? ثُمَّ أَسْأَلُ اللَّهَ الْفَهْمِ. And after reading those 100, I would ask Allah, oh Allah, allow me to correctly understand all of that which I have read. أقول يا معلم إبراهيم علمني. Oh, the teacher Ibrahim, teach me. And in some of the narrations, يا مفهم سليمان فهمني. And the one who gives Sulaiman understanding, give me understanding. وكنت أذهب إلى المساجد المهجورة ونحوها وأمرغ وجهي في التراب. And I would go to the abandoned masajid and I would put my face in the sand and in the turab, showing my need to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, I'm nothing and I need your help. So subhanAllah, look at Ibn Qayyim, look at what Shaykh al Usaymi Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah would do. So we should always constantly be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know the importance of dua generally, but more so, you want knowledge, I should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that knowledge. And then the third way in how we can gather all our zeen upon knowledge, to not despair in not reaching the level you desire. عدم العجز عن بلوغ البغية فيه. Don't despair. Right? You've got your tunnel vision, you've got your objective in mind. You've asked Allah for help. That's it. Just go for it. Don't look left and right. Don't give up until you have reached it. It may seem like, well, it's a bit difficult, it's a bit far away, it's going to take me years. Don't look left and right. Just go straight. Go for that objective and go and try to attain it. Some people, if they start seeking knowledge and they come across some obstacles, and obstacles are going to come. Right? Anyone who wants to attain anything important, anything of value, obstacles are going to come their way. You want to gain pearls, you have to go to the bottom of the sea. You want gold, you have to go into the coal mines. Likewise, anyone, you want to become the best footballer in the world, Look at Ronaldo, right? He travels. He trains, right, every single day, even until now. What is he, 40 or something, and still he can play better than us, right? Why? Because he puts in all that effort, and he doesn't give up, right? So we have to. Obstacles come, right? Then doesn't some people obstacles come, they give up straight away. Right? No, we can't be like that. We have to get up and we have to continue. And one thing, subhanAllah, Shaykh al Usaymi, when he explained this, he mentioned a nice benefit and motivating students. He said, any goodness you want, then the asl of it is ilm. Any goodness, then the foundation of that goodness is knowledge. Right? So how can you give up? How can you, if you've given up, then you're not going to attain any goodness. If you're not going to attain goodness, what's the opposite? You're going to attain bad or evil. Right? And that's something that's mentioned by Al-Qarafi in his book Al-Furuq. The aslu kulli khair al-ilm. Knowledge is the foundation of every goodness. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah says something similar. He says, aslu kulli khairin fi dunya wal-akhirah al-ilm wal-adl. That the foundation of every goodness in this dunya and in the akhirah is knowledge and justice. وَأَصْلُ كُلِّ شَرٍ فِي dunya wal-akhirah al-jahl wa dhulm. And the foundation of all evil in the dunya and the akhirah is ignorance and oppression. But in reality, even what Ibn al-Qayyim said is the same. Because what is justice, what is being adl, is placing something in the correct place. How is a judge, how is he just? Whatever your right is, he gives it to you. Right? That is based upon knowledge. Because if you don't know what a person's right is, how can you place it in the correct way? So the foundation of all goodness is knowledge. So these are the three principles. Right? You are eager to learn. What do you do now? Where do you direct all of that eagerness and that zeal that you have? Find what is beneficial to you. Ask Allah for help, and then go and attain that knowledge, and don't look left and right, and don't give up, and don't despair, and don't deter from that path. If you have a bad intention and then you rectify it in seeking knowledge, then that inshallah you'll be rewarded. You'll be rewarded. And Sufyan al-Thawri, he said, طلبنا العلم لغير الله فبل العلم أن يكون إلا لله. That we used to seek knowledge for other than Allah. In the beginning, when in the beginning you don't really know, right? So they just saw, okay, knowledge is this, is that. So they sought knowledge for other than Allah. But then the more they learn, أبل علم أن يكون إلا لله. The knowledge refused to be except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they rectify the intention. And there is an issue of doing actions with, it's called tashriq al-niyyah. An issue which is known as tashriq al-niyyah, which is when you do an action for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or if you do it for Allah and then later on another intention comes in, then is the action accepted? Or if you fight off that intention, then is it accepted? This is called tashriq al-niyyah. And I had it written here, but I didn't mention it. I had it written in my notes, but I didn't mention it. But since you asked, let me finish point number 3, and then after that, I'll explain the issue of tashriq al-niyyah, and you can add it into under the chapter of sincerity, inshallah. So the third principle was to gather one's zeal upon knowledge, and we said that is done by 3 ways, right? What is the proof for these 3 ways? The Shaykh mentions one hadith. Everyone should memorize this hadith. One hadith of the Prophet ﷺ mentioned these 3 things. The Prophet ﷺ said in Sahih Muslim, احرص على ما ينفعك. Strive in that which benefit you. واستعن بالله. And seek assistance with Allah. ولا تعجز. And then do not despair. Do not deter. Do not turn away from that path. Okay, so that's one hadith. The Prophet ﷺ mentions all 3. احرص على ما ينفعك. Strive in that which will benefit you. That's point number 1. واستعن بالله. And seek aid in Allah. Assistance with Allah. That's point number 2. And do not despair. ولا تعجز. That's point number 3. On the next page, the Shaykh says, Al-Junayd said, no one saw anything with diligence and truthfulness except that he attained what he sought. And if he did not attain all of it, then he attained some of it. So don't think if you're sincere and you're working hard, taking the correct path, and you're applying these 30 principles, don't give up, because even if you don't attain all of it, you'll at least attain some of it, some sort of goodness. And the more you do it, the more you will attain. Sometimes I'll read the book and I understand something. The same book, I'll come back to it, and I'm like, I never knew this part was in this book. I learned so many new things reading the book. Right? So you just got to be sincere, and you just got to be on that path, focus on that path, and just keep going on that path, and not to deter from that path. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says, إذا طلع نجم الهمة في ظلام ليل البطالة وردفه قمر العزيمة أشرقت الأرض بنور ربها. If the star of aspiration, is a bit metaphorical, but if the star of aspiration rises on a quiet dark night and it is joined with the moon of determination, then it shines upon the earth with the light of its Lord. So if you have that motivation and then you are determined, basically the 3 points that we mentioned, right? Then it will shine upon the earth with the light of its Lord. That's when you will benefit. Then he says, from those things that increases a person's zeal or a person's eagerness and brings a person's zeal together is that you look at the condition of those who proceeded and you learn about their aspirations. So the Shaykh is basically saying here that from the greatest ways that a person he keeps high aspirations and he stays motivated is by reading the biographies of the pious predecessors. Is by reading the biography of the pious predecessors. So somebody asks you a question, how does a person stay motivated? From the greatest ways is having high aspirations. I'm going to add at the end of this chapter some other ways that you can also attain high aspirations, inshallah. But what the Shaykh mentions here, and this is one of the greatest ones, is that you read the biographies of the pious predecessors. Abu Abdullah, he's going to mention some of these incidents. Abu Abdullah Ahmad ibn Hanbal used to want to go out in his youth to the circles of the scholars before Fajr. So his mother would take him by his clothes and say to him, out of mercy, wait up until the people call the adhan or they start leaving their homes. Meaning Imam Ahmad, he was so eager, he would wake up before Fajr, before everybody else, and he's ready to go and learn. But his mum, out of mercy for him and not wanting him to go out in dark, she would say, okay, wait until Fajr time at least, wait until other people are also out. Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi reads all of Sahih al-Bukhari to Ismail al-Hiri in 3 sittings. Al-Hiri in 3 sittings. 2 of them being in 2 nights from the time of Maghrib prayer till Fajr prayer. The 3rd day being from the morning till Maghrib prayer, and then from Maghrib till Fajr. So basically Khatib al-Baghdadi, he read all of Sahih al-Bukhari in 3 days. The first day was from Maghrib till Fajr, and the 2nd day Maghrib till Fajr, and then the 3rd day from the morning till Fajr the next day, basically, in 3 sittings. Sahih Bukhari is how many hadith? About 5,000 hadith. He did it in 3 days. And subhanallah, with Khatib al-Baghdadi, some people like Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr al-Shilli in his book Al-Mashra' al-Rawi, he mentioned that this is incorrect. He mentioned that Khatib al-Baghdadi didn't do it in 3 days. Rather, he did it in 5 days. But in reality, because he couldn't believe it, right? And there is another narration. But the reality is, Khatib al-Baghdadi, he finished Bukhari twice. Once was in 3 days, and the other time was 5 days. So when it was 5 days, then he recited it upon Karimah al-Marwaziyah. He recited it upon Karimah al-Marwaziyah, and that took him 5 days during the days of Hajj. So he recited it upon Karimah al-Marwaziyah 5 days during the days of Hajj. And then the other time, he recited it in 3 days, and that is the one that the Shaykh mentioned in the book. And Khatib, Imam al-Dhahabi, right? Imam al-Dhahabi, when he mentioned this incident of Khatib al-Baghdadi, he commented in his book Tarikh al-Islam, and he said, وَهَذَا شَيْءٌ لَا أَعْلَمُ أَحَدًا فِي زِمَانِنَا يَسْتَطِيعُ. This is something that I do not know anyone in my time who is able to do it. And he's trying to show how great of an achievement it was what Khatib al-Baghdadi had done. However, the reality is, Shaykh al Usaymi, when he explained this book, he said the reality is that this actually did take place. It actually did take place. There's a scholar called Ibn Tulun, who was from the 10th century. He wanted to copy Khatib al-Baghdadi, so he also read al-Bukhari to one of his teachers, and he was able to finish it in 3 days, just like Khatib al-Baghdadi did it. So there was 5 centuries between Khatib al-Baghdadi and Ibn Tulun, but he was able to do it. Why? because the aspiration was there. So if anybody has these high aspirations and he is sincere and he takes a correct path and he is serious, then he can reach and accomplish these great achievements if he wants to. So if you hear some of the stories of the Salaf and you think, how do they do it? Then we can also do it. But we have to have the same amount of sincerity and the same amount of motivation and seriousness when it comes to achieving these goals. Then the Shaykh, he says, in the early stages of his studies, Abu Muhammad at-Tabban used to study the whole night. Then his mother would have mercy upon him and would forbid him from doing so in the night time. So he used to take the candle and put it under his large pot, and he pretended to sleep, and when she slept, he would turn to his class. You know, that's what kids do now, the same thing but with their phones. Right? When mom's asleep, I pull the phone out again, pull the PlayStation out again. But they used to do it when it comes to seeking knowledge. So be a man whose feet are firmly fixed to the ground, with zeal and high aspiration, towering way above the ground. And do not be youthful in physique, weak and old in aspiration. For indeed the truthful, their eagerness never becomes old. And you can have a youngster who's young in age, but his aspiration is like an old person. Oh, I'm going to die, no point, I can't do anything. Right? My time's up. You know, some old people, right? It's true, you tell them, attend the class, I'm old. I tell my kids, time's gone for me. Right? You find some youngsters like that, no, I can't do it. But then you'll find the opposite. You'll find some people who are very old in age, but their aspirations are very young. No, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to learn, I'm going to become this, I want to achieve this. Look at Ibn Jawzi rahimahullah. He learned the qira'at in his 80s. In his 80s. Say that to somebody now in their 20s, they'll be like, nah, that's too hard. Memorize the Quran, it's too hard. The Shaykh, he says, Abu al-Wafa ibn Aqil. Abu al-Wafa ibn Aqil is a scholar. He's written the biggest book which is known to us, Al-Funun, which is 800 volumes. 800 volumes. However, the issue is that book has not reached us. The whole book it got lost, I believe, in Baghdad and so on, or it was burnt, something like that. So it's not reached us. But he had written the biggest book. So Abu al-Wafa ibn Aqil, one of the world's most intelligent scholars from the jurists of the Hanbali fiqh, used to chant whilst in his 80s, ما شاب عزمي ولا حزمي ولا خلقي ولا ولائي ولا ديني ولا كرمي وإنما اعتاض شعري غير صبغته والشيب في الشعر غير الشيب في الهمم. My determination, my diligence, my mannerisms have not become old, nor my allegiance, nor my religion and my generosity. The only thing that has changed is my hair, not being its usual feature. And being old in hair is different to being old in your aspirations. Subhanallah, right? He also has other statements. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, in his book Al-Dhayl fi Tabaqati Al-Hanabila, volume 1, page 145 to 146. Ibn Rajab mentions that Ibn Aqil, he used to, and I think he quotes Ibn al-Jawzi, but Ibn Aqil كان دائم التشاغل. He would always be busy بالعلم, with knowledge. حتى إني رأيت بخطي, until once I even saw Ibn Jawzi saying, I saw him write in his own handwriting, إني لا يحل لي أن أضيع ساعة من عمري. It is not permissible for me to waste even an hour of my life. حتى إذا تعطل لساني عن مذاكرة ومناظرة. And if my tongue is not able to revise and to discuss, وبصري عن مطالعة, and my eyes are not able to read, أعمل فكري في حال راحتي وأنا مستطرح. Then I would start thinking. Whilst I'm lying down and relaxing, I would start thinking. إلا وفلا أنهض إلا وقد خطر لي ما أسره. And I would not get up except that I know what I'm going to start writing again. وإني لأجد من حرصي على العلم وأنا في عشر الثمانين أشد مما كنت أجده وأنا ابن 20 سنة. And the eagerness that I find within myself whilst I'm in my 80s is more than what I used to find when I was in my 20s. SubhanAllah. In another place, Ibn Rajab quotes that Ibn Aqil said regarding himself, that I exert all my effort, all my time when in seeking knowledge, even the time when I'm eating. And what he said, what he used to do is I used to get bread, instead of it being hard and he had to spend time chewing it, he'd mix it with water, just so that he can save time and it's a bit quicker for him to digest it. And subhanAllah, even things like that. Let's say when Albani rahimahullah, he had a door, right? And I'm forgetting exactly how he did it, but the handle was in a certain way that when he had to open it, he had to go forward or back, and it took him a bit longer. So he had his handle changed just so it was easy for him to open it. You know, subhanAllah, he would even get his handle changed because it took him 2-3 seconds more. He wanted to save time, change his handle. Look at the ulama, were not wasting any time, just focused on seeking knowledge. So this was the third principle. We want to finish with one extra benefit when it comes to the third point, which is what are some of the ways that we can attain high aspiration. We mentioned one, but I'm going to mention 5 inshallah. And it's some lines of poetry that I've mentioned before. I believe I mentioned it in our hadith course as well. So lines of poetry, and what I'll do is I'll send these lines of poetry inshallah in Arabic in the group as well inshallah, so it's easier for you guys to write. But it was some lines of poetry that Shaykh Amir Bahjat said, and actually the one who informed me of this was Abu Taymiyyah. He informed me of this, he sent it to me. But anyway, Shaykh Amir Bahjat, he says, وَخَمْسَةٌ عِلَاجُ ضَعْفِ الْهِمَّةِ قِرَاءَةٌ فِي سِيرِ الْأَئِمَّةِ. And 5 things are the cure for the weakness of aspirations. قِرَاءَةٌ فِي سِيرِ الْأَئِمَّةِ. Reading the biographies of the Imams. That's the first one. وَذِكْرُ فَضْلِ الْعِلْمِ وَالتَّعَلُّمِ وَصُحْبَةِ الطُّلَّابِ أَهْلِ الْهِمَمِ. Number 2, وَذِكْرُ فَضْلِ الْعِلْمِ وَالتَّعَلُّمِ. And remembering the virtues of knowledge and seeking knowledge. Remembering the virtues of knowledge and learning. So all of the knowledge, all of the virtues that we mentioned in the first lesson, remember them. That it's an easy way to pass the Jannah. It is a sign that Allah loves you and He wants good for you. When a person remembers these virtues, then what happens? Close it. What happens? That motivates a person. That motivates a person. وَصُحْبَةِ الطُّلَّابِ أَهْلِ الْهِمَمِ. And accompanying students that have high aspirations. Number 3, accompanying students that have high aspirations. When you are around people, imagine you're with people and there's a lesson going on, they're like, nah, you know what, let's go out instead. Let's go out to eat. What's going to happen? You're going to end up going out to eat, you're not going to learn. But then you have others who said, no, we have to go to this lesson. We need to benefit from this lesson, very important. Even if you're, I'm tired, no, you got to come with us. Then you're going to benefit. And if you're around people who are always talking about knowledge, you're always going to be thinking about knowledge. If you're around people who are talking about football, you're always going to be thinking about football. So the third way in how you can have high aspirations is accompanying students that have high aspirations as well. And then the last line of poetry, how many have you mentioned? 1, 2, 3. Now, وَنَقَّلَةُ الْمَلُولِ مِنْ صِنْفٍ إِلَىٰ آخَرَ فِيمَا نَفْعُهُ قَدْ حَصَلَ. The fourth is that the one who is bored, he moves from one topic to another topic in that which there is benefit. In that which there is benefit. What this means is that if you're studying one topic for a long time, it may happen that you become a bit bored of it. It's too much. You want something new, right? So there's no harm if you finish one topic, go to another topic. We finish hadith, we've come to another topic, adab, no problem. And maybe after that we'll go to aqidah, right? And then the fourth line, لكي تعود نفسه مشتاقة. لكي تعود نفسه مشتاقة. وعدم التحصيل وعدم التحميل فوق الطاقة. So he says لكي تعود نفسه مشتاقة. So you change topic, why? لكي تعود نفسه مشتاقة, so that your soul can be longing for that first topic again. And so you move to a new one and you're excited about a new one and you start learning that new one, and then you miss the first one and you go and learn again the first one. And then the last thing, وعدم التحميل فوق الطاقة, not taking more than what you are able to bear. So there are some students that, alright, 20 lessons a week, that's too much, right? And they end up burning out and giving up on all of that. Now, so with that is, we finished the third principle, which is to gather all one's zeal upon knowledge. And we do that by 3 things, by the 3 mentioned, and then you have to memorize the dalil, which is the hadith, and also learn the 5 ways of how a person can remain motivated, or how a person can increase in their motivation. Now, because the brother asked, go back to the chapter of intention, being sincere. We're going to talk about the issue of tashrikun niyyah. The issue of tashrik and niyyah. Tashrikun niyyah is referring to your sincerity or your intention sharing another intention. I mean, you're doing it for Allah or you're doing it for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ruling of this differs, and it varies depending on the situation. It differs and it varies depending on the situation. So there are 3 situations of this intention. There are 3 situations. Right? So this issue, when I ask you the question, what is the ruling on having another intention and sharing that intention with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're not going to say allowed, not allowed. You're going to say there's 3 scenarios, or there's 3 situations for that, for this ruling. Alhamdulillah. Now, the first scenario is the foundation of the action. The foundation of the action. Meaning, if the foundation, i.e. before the action, right? If the foundation of the action, i.e. the reason you're doing that action is for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the action is not accepted. If the intention from the beginning, the reason you're doing the action is for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the action is not accepted. Then, the second scenario, during the action. During the action. If during the action, so you've started doing the action sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then during the action, shaitan comes and he changes your intention. What's the ruling? There's 2 scenarios. The first is that you fight that intention. You fight that intention and you rectify that intention, then it is correct. Then the action is correct. Let's say you're praying salah and then the imam walks in. So shaitan comes to you and you think that I want to elongate my salah to impress the imam. But then you realize, hang on, this is not the correct intention. So you fight it and then you rectify your intention and you continue praying only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's the ruling on that salah? It's correct. That salah is valid, it's correct, and inshallah it is accepted. The second scenario is that you don't fight off that intention and that intention, the invalid intention continues. The invalid intention continues. What's the ruling then? Then there's two more scenarios. Then there is 2 more scenarios. So you might have to do a tree diagram at the end, yeah? If the action is an action which is all connected, like salah. It's all connected. You don't have a break in the middle of salah, right? It's all connected. If it's all connected like salah, and you've not thought of that intention, then that action is not accepted. Then that action is not accepted. The second scenario here is that act of worship has different parts to it. Different separate parts to it. If that is the case, then when you are sincere, those actions where you are sincere are accepted, and those actions where you weren't sincere, they are rejected. So for example, you have zakah to give. And you don't give it to one person, you give it to 10 different people. You give it to 10 poor people. So you go to the first 5 and you give it to them and you're sincere. Then after that, the next 5, you weren't sincere. You did the next 5 to show off, oh look how much I give. Right? What's the ruling on the zakah? We say the first 5 are accepted. But then the later 5 are not accepted. Because these are separate. Right? You give this person, then you go to the next person's house, separate. These are separate actions. So does that make sense? Yeah? So to summarize, if your intention becomes corrupt during the action, then if you fight it off, it's fine. If you don't fight it off, then what? Two more scenarios. Don't say if you don't fight it, it's not accepted. No, two more scenarios. Which is if the salah, if the act of worship is all connected, like salah, then it is invalid. If it's separate parts, then that which is sincere is accepted, and that which is not sincere, then it is not accepted. Now we come back to the top again, which is the three main scenarios. The first was the foundation of the action. The second was during the action. The third is after the action. After the action. If after the action, so you've done the action sincerely, but then after the action you weren't sincere, then that does not have an effect on the action itself. So for example, you prayed sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that time, but then later on you want to show off, or shaitan comes to you and you're like, shaitan's like, mention that good deed that you did, so you end up mentioning it, right? That doesn't have an effect on the validity of your salah. However, you're still sinful for the showing off that you did later, but it doesn't have an effect on the original act of worship that you did. But some ulama, they make an exception to this. So, unless you're transgressing it against somebody else. So for example, if you give a poor person charity, that's for the sake of Allah, right? But then later on you come and you use that, oh, but I did this for you, you should be doing this for me, I did this for you, and you're transgressing now. You're trying to show that you've done a favor upon this person. In that scenario, then the original action could be invalid, because now you're using that action to transgress against somebody else. So that's the only exception. When there's man in there, where you are, you're transgressing, or you're using that action against somebody else, then in that action, that's like the only exception that ulama mentioned in regards to the action not being accepted. So to summarize, what's the ruling of showing off in your actions? Or what is the ruling on having more than one intention when it comes to worship? Three scenarios: before the action, during the action, and after the action. Before the action is not accepted. During the action, if you fight it off, it's accepted. If you don't fight it off, then if the whole action is connected, then it's not accepted. If it's separate, then parts which are sincere are accepted and parts which aren't are not accepted. And then the third scenario is after the action, and that does not have an effect on the validity of the actual action, unless you are transgressing against somebody else. Yeah. Shall we take chapter 4 or not? Let's see. Okay, chapter 4 we can take. Be quick, inshallah. So, now. So, principle number 4, page 26. Exerting your zeal to the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. This is more of an expansion upon the previous chapter. The previous chapter, the first point was what? To have tunnel vision. To focus on that which is beneficial. The fourth principle is telling you what is beneficial. What knowledge is beneficial is that knowledge which is based upon the Quran and the Sunnah. Why? The Shaykh says in the beginning, indeed all beneficial knowledge, its return point is the speech of Allah and the speech of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We mentioned the statement of Ibn Qayyim and Al-Qarafi, that the foundation of all goodness is knowledge. And what is that knowledge? Knowledge which is based upon the Quran and Sunnah. We can add that to their definition or their statements. And the rest of the types of knowledge are either a service to those two, so take from it in accordance with that which will actualize that service, or it's foreign to those two, so it does not harm being ignorant of it. So anything other than the Quran and Sunnah is one of two things. Either it helps you understand the Quran and Sunnah, or it's ajnabi, it's foreign to it. It's got nothing to do with Quran and Sunnah. If it helps you, then you can learn that. If it's got nothing to do with it, then there's no harm if you don't know it. And obviously that has a lot of detail. Some of those sciences may be haram for you to learn. In certain scenarios, some may be obligatory. For example, if there's not a doctor in the Muslim community, then it might be a communal obligation for at least one person to be a doctor. To summarize this paragraph, the Islamic sciences are two. The Islamic sciences that we need to learn are two. Ulum al-ghaya and ulum al-ala. Ulum al-ghaya, those sciences which are the objectives. Those sciences which are the objectives. And ulum al-ala, those sciences which are the tools. Those which are the objectives, they are the objectives, the things that that the main objective that you're trying to learn. So for example, the science of Aqidah, what you have to believe, that's the objective. We need to learn we need to know what we have to believe in. Likewise fiqh, we need to know how to correctly pray salah, and so on. But then you have ulum al-ala, the tools, the instruments, the sciences of tools, the sciences of instruments. Those things which help you understand the objectives, like the Arabic language. Like mustalah al-hadith. Mustalah al-hadith is, it tells you what is authentic hadith, what makes a hadith weak, which hadith can you accept, and so on. So to understand hadith, you need to know these things. Because if a hadith is weak, then we don't act upon it, for example. Right? Likewise, usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh teaches you how to extract the ruling. So you want to know a fiqh ruling? That teaches you how to extract the ruling from the Quran and the Sunnah. So then author he says, and how beautiful is the speech of Iyad in his book Al-Ilma', where he says, I'll just read the English. Knowledge is in two foundations and isn't surpassed, except by the one who is astray from the straight path. Knowledge of the book and narrations that have been relayed in a chain from tabi'i, from sahabi. Sahabi. What he's trying to say here is that all knowledge goes back to the Quran and the Sunnah. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ was commanded. فَاسْتَمْسِكْ بِالَّذِي أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ. Cling on to that which is being revealed to you. إِنَّكَ عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Verily you are upon the right path. And that's why you find many people who leave off learning the Quran and Sunnah and start learning philosophy and start learning statements of scholars instead of going back to what Allah said in the Quran and what the Prophet ﷺ said in the Sunnah. They end up adding into innovations into religion, making up new things, falling into sins, and so on. Why? Because they've left off the source of the religion, which is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That's why Ibn Mas'ud, he said, "Man arad al-ilm." Whoever wants knowledge, فَلْيُثَوِّرِ الْقُرْآنِ. Let him examine the Quran, let him research the Quran. فَإِنَّ فِيهِ عِلْمُ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَالْآخِرِينَ. For verily it contains the knowledge of the first people and the last people. Masruq, he says, مَا نَسْأَلُ أَصْحَابَ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ عَنْ شَيْءٍ. We do not ask the companions of the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم anything except that their knowledge إِلَّا عِلْمُهُ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. Their knowledge was in the Quran. إِلَّا أَنَّ عِلْمُنَا يَقْصُرُ عَنْهُ. But our knowledge is deficient. We don't have knowledge of the Quran. But the Sahaba ask him anything, the answer they would give from the Quran. And that's why Allah says, نَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ تِبْيَانًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. We have sent on the Quran as an explanation for everything. The Quran has everything. Ibn Abbas says, جميع العلوم في القرآن ولكن تقاصر عنه أفهام الرجال. All of knowledge is in the Quran. But the issue is, the understanding of men is deficient. We don't look into the Quran. We look at other things. Or we don't look at anything at all. Then the Shaykh continues to say, this used to be the knowledge of the Salaf. May Allah have mercy upon them. Then speech became plentiful in those that came after them, as that which does not benefit. We talked about this before, right? That beneficial knowledge is based on what is in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So whoever wants to have knowledge, then he has to purify that knowledge with what is in the Quran and Sunnah, with Tawheed and with the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And whoever dirties and impurifies that knowledge with innovations and so on, he will not benefit from that knowledge. So we have to have zakah and zakat. Intelligence isn't enough. We have to have purified knowledge, i.e. from the Quran and the Sunnah. And that's why Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, when he talked about some of the people in innovation, he said, "Utu zaka'an wa lam yu'tu zaka'a." They were given intelligence, but they weren't given zakat, purification. وَأُعْطُوا عُلُومًا وَلَمْ يُعْطَوْا فُهُومًا. They were given knowledge, but not understanding. They were given سَمْعًا وَأَبْصَارًا وَأَفْئِدَةً, hearing, seeing, and hearts, but that did not benefit them. Now, because it's salah time, we'll stop here. Remember, inshallah, we are halfway through this paragraph, and inshallah we'll continue from this paragraph. This used to be the knowledge of the Salaf. We'll continue from there next week, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa hamdaka, la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.